What's up, y'all? Welcome to Political Fight Club. I'm Robert Durden. This is the second part of the series that I told you guys I was going to do. We're doing the top 10 horror movies from Netflix and Prime. Basically, the top 10 streaming horror movies that you can get via a jailbroken Fire Stick. If you want to steal one and have somebody break it for you, or if you know how to do that thing, highly recommend. Steal these movies. Anyway, that's why I say it's the Poor People Horror Movies series, because these are the ones that we can afford. They cost nothing, as far as I know. So we did Netflix in the last one. We're going to do the top, almost 10 from Prime here. And again, these aren't in any particular order. And some of these also I included in the original video where I was talking about just like straight across the board, what are my favorite movies. But this is basically just the top ones that I've seen over the past couple of years that you may not have heard of that are on Prime. And if you watch one a day from here until Halloween, you will thank me later. These are a lot of fun. So in no particular order, we're going to start with Come to Daddy. I ranked this one in my first video. It was like one of my top 10 favorite horror movies of all time that is basically nobody knows about. It's got Elijah Wood in it. It's not really a horror. It's like a gross thriller, but it's one of those movies you'll laugh along the way. A lot of times you'll be cringing and like peeking through your fingers at the funny / disgusting / horrible stuff that's happening in it. Highly recommend. It's about Elijah Wood and his estranged son going to meet with his dad after decades of separating. And they meet up at the dad's new beach house. And they find out, or he finds out, that his dad is into some shady ass shit, some really disgusting stuff, and a whole bunch of characters that he meets while he's at this beach house are horrible. So it's a great movie. I laughed along the way. There's a couple of scenes where it's just like so absurd, over the top violent that it almost makes you crack up. So I highly recommend Come to Daddy. The Descent. This is an old one. It's one of my all-time favorites. The old movie where the group of women who are longtime friends go spelunking together. And they're doing it as sort of like a way to help one of their friends get over the loss of her husband. And as they get down into the depths, it gets more and more claustrophobic, and they get a little bit more and more paranoid as they run into these creatures that can climb on the walls, that are kind of humanoid, they can see in the dark. And they start losing it a little bit, and then as the storyline unfolds, and they get into darker corners of this cavern, they start to get at each other's throats, and a storyline of betrayal and of certain women not really liking each other at all. It all comes to the surface. So it's also got that undertone of like, you kind of know there's something going on between a couple of the women at the beginning, and as they get more and more frightened and deeper into the cave, they start to turn on each other. So The Descent isn't one of my all-time favorites. It's kind of old. It's over a decade old, but it's on Amazon Prime right now. Highly recommend. The Taking of Deborah Logan. This is a found footage film. It's about a film crew that's going to make a documentary on progressive dementia or Alzheimer's, and what they decide to do is film this older lady, Deborah Logan, who's in progressive dementia, and just follow her around in her big country farmhouse with her, I think it's her daughter takes care of her. And as they start to film her, they realize that some of the stuff that she's doing isn't exactly dementia. It might actually be possession. So it's very, very scary. It has the shot again at the end. It's got a great ending that is super tense, and it's very, very. You don't know what's going on in terms of her mental capabilities as far as dementia goes and as far as possession goes until the last quarter of the movie, and the some of the shots that they get are kind of like Paranormal Activity, where they're very, very shocking. It's shocking to see them in found footage films, so it's very well done. Taking of Deborah Logan, highly recommend. This next one is not one of my favorites, but it is worth seeing at least once. It's called Vivarium, with Jesse Eisenberg, and I think it's Imogen Poots. It's about a young couple searching for their first house, and they go to this better-than-reality neighborhood where it almost seems like everything is simulated. The hues of the sky are way too gorgeous all the time for it to be real. And at first they're in love with it, and then they realize that they can't actually escape the neighborhood. They're stuck in the house forever. And they've got this, even though it's beautiful all the time, they've got this child that just shows up on their doorstep that they're basically expected to take care of, and that's the only way that they're allowed to escape this perfect neighborhood that they eventually become maddened by. So it's very, very trippy. The end is particularly psychedelic. And again, it's not like any other movie you've ever seen, not like any other movie on this list, but worth at least watching once. It's never quite left my mind as being kind of like a unique horror movie that I've never seen another movie quite like it. That's called Vivarium with Jesse Eisenberg. The next one is called The Vast of Night. This is a movie about a couple of youngsters in an old town, and I forget when it takes place. It might be, back in the 70s, 60s, something like that. I can't remember. But basically what it has to do with is this young lady running a radio station with this other young gentleman, like a school radio station. And without giving away too much, basically they start to pick up transmissions that sound very much like they're coming from an alien spacecraft or something. And so as the story unfolds, these two are trying to solve the mystery of where these weird signals that only they seem to be picking up are coming from, and it seems more and more likely that they're seeing the beginnings of an alien invasion. Very, very creepy, unique movie, and the shots are really cool too, where they'll rather than cutting to the two of them, between the two characters as they separate, a lot of times the camera will just leave one of them, drive down a hallway, in between some things to the other side of town. So the shots are very cool in that way, very unique. That's called The Vast of Night. It's about alien invasion. The next one is The Road, another old one based off the old book by Cormac McCarthy about the end of the world, where the sun is basically not shining barely anymore, and it's the apocalypse with, cannibals. Not necessarily zombies, but everybody's cannibalized because there's no more food because nothing's growing anymore. This is a very unwieldy movie. Same with the book. Very sad. It's about a dad and his son trying to survive this and trying to get to the coast where they believe there's a haven. And not for the faint of heart. There's cannibalism. There's a realism to this movie that is unbelievable. So it's very melancholy. There's very little hope in the film at all. But it is a very good movie, worth watching at least once. So it's gut-wrenching, but just like its source material, The Road is a little bit much for some people. If you're looking for a happy ending, I wouldn't watch this movie. But it is very good. Very, very good classic horror movie, in my opinion. The next one is Midsommar. I mentioned in the previous episode this is one of the best cult movies of all time, if not the best cult movie ever. And the reason that it is so good, and why I think it's a masterpiece by Ari Aster, who also did Hereditary, which is in my top 10, is that it really is a 2.5-hour movie and an exercise on how it feels to be indoctrinated into a cult. So that when you get to the end, depending on how well the movie has done indoctrinating you, you kind of feel differently depending on how well it has done that. So the last scene is crazy. It has the shot as well as all Ari Aster films do. It's horrifying, and it's shot entirely in daylight, so there's no dark scenes. It's a horror movie that has zero darkness in it, which is another completely unique aspect about the movie. It is about, in its bones, in its soul, about losing a family member, which that always adds so much to the horror for me. So the characters are well thought out. It's really an allegory for loss, and again, an allegory for the indoctrination process that happens to one as they get into a cult. Midsommar. Probably the best cult movie I've ever seen. Highly recommend. Next one is called Lake Mungo, another found footage one. It's paranormal in nature, about a family coping with the loss of their daughter who just drowned. And they start getting these weird things happening at their house right after that and start documenting it with their home camera. And they find out that their daughter may or may not be haunting them. It also could just be kind of them coping with the loss. But this is another one that's very emotional. It's gut-wrenching. It's beautiful in a lot of ways. And it's very, very low budget. I mean, one of the best found footage, low budget films of all time. Lake Mungo. Check it out. You'll like it. It's good. It's very short as well. Last one, but not least, is one I mentioned in my honorable mentions in my first video, is The Loved Ones. It's about, it's like Hostel if Hostel had a good storyline. Not for the faint of heart. Extremely sadistic. But not like, the Hostel movies where it seemed like a lot of it was kind of unwarranted. It is very much written into a solid storyline that you will care about the characters quite a bit. The acting's off the charts, and you will never see electric drills again the same way. It's one of those. So watch at your own risk. Again, it's very short, but it doesn't get any better in terms of a movie that just is tense all the way throughout and has a very interesting and societally an interest commentary on society. And I think it takes place in Australia. I could be wrong there, but like I said, I've always remembered it as being like Hostel, but with a really good storyline built behind it. So again, watch at your own risk, but it's one of my all-time favorites. That's called The Loved Ones. Now I want to make I have a correction, or not a correction, but from earlier in the day I did my first video. I forgot one that I may not have ranked in the top 10, but is another good one on Netflix. That's Crimson Peak. That's Guillermo del Toro's movie. It has Tom Hiddleston in it as the main character, and then the young lady from Alice in Wonderland. I forget what her name is. It's eluding me at the moment. That's a great haunted house movie, and great imagery. You can always count on Guillermo del Toro to come up with amazing, like, creepy ghosts and characters. And the family drama that it is really well written. Very scary, but also all the characters are very well-rounded. And it has one of the coolest haunted houses in the history of haunted house films, Crimson Peak. Highly recommend. And then I've been told that these I have not seen on Prime, but I'm going to watch them over the next 2 days or 3 days. The Wailing and Train to Busan, which I knew about Train to Busan, and I'd heard of The Wailing before, but I have not seen them. So I've heard those are amazing as well. I'm going to watch those over the next couple of days. Let me know what you think. If I missed any, please let me know. But let me repeat just in case you didn't write them down. Come to Daddy, The Descent, The Taking of Deborah Logan, Vivarium, The Vast of Night, The Road, Midsommar, Lake Mungo, and The Loved Ones. And then The Wailing and Train to Busan are the ones I'm going to watch, which I know are also available on Prime. So I hope you enjoyed that, you guys. Now, no matter what, you should have at least some access to one of the 30 or 40 that I've given you over the last couple of days. Let's enjoy ourselves. Let's get a little bit scared. Let's enjoy some... a lot of my horror movies that I pick out tend to have a very strict societal commentary motif going on. So a lot of them, it's like the main characters are very much like poor people who are really struggling against mental anguish and physical trauma. Not all of them have happy endings, but some of them do. So I hope you can enjoy that with me. Let's have a good time. Keep fighting the good fight out there. I'll put up the Basement Files vid on Cenk Uygur and Sanjay Gupta later today. We'll see you.